Assalamu alaikum, my brothers and sisters. The Battle of Badr is one of the most important battles in Islamic history. It's the first battle where the Muslims fought against the disbelievers after the migration to Medina. The Muslims were heavily outnumbered, but still managed to win a great victory. In this video, we will look at how the Muslims prepared for this battle. Welcome to the channel. The preparation started long before the armies met on the field of Badr. As soon as the Muslims arrived in Medina, they were attacked by the tribes of the region. They fought several battles against the Muslims during this period. One of the worst defeats was the Battle of Uhud. When the Muslims were almost wiped out, they retreated to Medina. But soon after, Abu Bakr, as Siddiq may Allah be pleased with him, became the leader of the Muslims. He then asked the Muslims to get ready to fight the tribes that attacked them. When the tribe of Quraysh attacked the Muslims again, the Muslims got ready. Under the leadership of Abu Bakr as Siddiq, the Muslims left Medina. At this time, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed Abu Bakr as Siddiq as the commander of the Muslim army, not because he was the best fighter or the best military strategist, but because he was the best of the Muslims at that time. After appointing him as the commander of the army, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam joined the army and said, "Whoever is willing to help Abu Bakr should come forward and join him." Allah. Then the Muslims joined their forces to Abu Bakr's army. On the other side, the polytheists were led by their war leader Suraka bin Malik, who was also Abu Jahl's brother. According to some reports, it was around 4,000, while others say it was much more than that. At that time, the Muslims were very few in number. We all know that it's difficult to fight when you are few in numbers, so the Muslims decided to retreat and go back to Medina. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard about this, he came out of his house and climbed up the pulpit of Mount Salam. From there he delivered a powerful speech to boost the morale of the Muslims and tell them to stand firm. After that, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered all able-bodied male Muslims to arm themselves for jihad. Some were told to stay back and guard Medina. Others were told to join the army. Those who stayed back were told to pray to units of Fajr prayer, and after that, whoever survived would have to leave Medina and join the army. This was done so that no one could stay behind in Medina, claiming to be sick or weak. Some of the Muslims were given special tasks. For example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed the Ansarians to bring anything they could use for a siege. After finishing the Fajr prayer, the Muslims left Medina in the early hours of the morning. There were around 310 Muslims in total, but unfortunately, some of them weren't properly armed. Some only had shields, others had swords or spears. Very few had armor. There were some old men and boys among them. In Islam, fighting is only allowed if it's absolutely necessary. The Muslims tried their best to avoid fighting this battle, but they had no choice, because the disbelievers wanted to wipe them out. So the Muslims had to defend themselves. On their way, the Muslims came across a place called Al-Roha. It was an area between Medina and Badr. They had to cross this valley to reach the battlefield. When Suraka bin Malik saw the Muslims crossing the valley, he thought they were running away from the battle, so he ordered his men to attack them. The Muslims quickly made defensive walls on both sides of the valley to protect themselves from the enemy attack. They used whatever materials they could find, such as stones, broken bricks, and palm wood. They made these defensive walls so that the enemy couldn't enter the valley. And that's why till today, we have this sunnah of making defensive walls during battles. After building these defensive walls, the Muslims prayed the morning prayer. Then they left the valley and continued their journey to the battlefield. Upon seeing this, Suraka thought that maybe these Muslims are going back, so he let them go. But actually the Muslims were just going to the nearby hill to see if they could spot the enemy. But Suraka didn't know that. He thought the Muslims were afraid of fighting and went back to Medina. This is a great lesson for us that we should never underestimate our enemies. Meanwhile, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was busy with the preparations for the battle. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam had already designated some areas for those who wanted to perform wudu or wash themselves before the battle. He also designated places for the sick people, prisoners, and the corpses of the martyrs. Then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gathered the Muslims and informed them that the enemy was in front of them. He then divided the army into 3 parts. Each part was under the command of one of the best fighters. So there were 3 leaders in total. Then the Prophet Salam gave them some instructions before the battle. First, he told them to show bravery and not to be afraid, even if they are few in number. Second, he told them that they can gain rewards, even if they don't personally fight. How can they do that? Well, for example, someone might be guarding the baggage of the other person who's fighting. That too is an act of jihad. Third, the Prophet ﷺ told them to only attack when they are ordered to attack. If they attack without an order, it will be considered as a sin. The Prophet ﷺ told them to attack the enemy in such a way that their right wing attacks the enemy's left wing, and their left wing attacks the enemy's right wing. This is because the left side of any person is weaker than their right side. So the Prophet ﷺ wanted to surround the enemy and defeat them easily. He also told them to look for honorable men from among the polytheists to take them as prisoners. These prisoners would later become important figures in spreading the message of Islam. Fourth, Prophet Salam told them that anyone who kills Abu Jahl will get a special reward. This is because Abu Jahl was the main person who was behind all the persecution of the Muslims in Makkah. He was like the ringleader of the whole thing. Fifth, the Prophet Salam told them to keep on calling the people to Islam until the last moment. Perhaps someone would accept Islam and thus earn the pleasure of Allah Almighty. Sixth, the Prophet Salam warned them not to loot the spoils of war, which belonged to Allah. And also he reminded them that there will be a resurrection after this world, and people will be judged according to their deeds. Seventh, the Prophet ﷺ told them to make sure that the corpses of the martyrs are identified and handed over to their families for burial, and whoever was able to identify their relatives would get a special reward. Eighth, the Prophet ﷺ told them to always put their trust in Allah Almighty. So these were the preparations and the instructions that were given before the Battle of Badr. Next, we will discuss what happened during the battle itself. And there we will see how the Muslims won despite being less in number and having less weapons. We'll also see how the Prophet ﷺ proved his prophethood during this battle. Before ending this video, I want to point out that most of what happened in this battle is reported by Muslim scholars from the Hadith of Jabir bin Abdullah. May Allah be pleased with him. So if you want to read a detailed account of the battle, you can refer to the book called Sirat al-Nabawi by Sheikh Sofi A.R. Riyad. And you can also read other books on the Battle of Badr. The forces are lined up. The day of the battle begins. We've gone explore what would happen if one of our most feared monsters went toe-to-toe against one of our most powerful summoned beings. It's the giant space worm from beyond the stars, the devourer of worlds, the harbinger of destruction, Cthulhu versus the almighty God King, the king of the gods, the ruler of the heavens, Zeus. Now before I start, let me say this. There is no way in hell that anyone can prove or disprove the existence of a cosmic entity such as Cthulhu, and who am I to say that Zeus doesn't exist? Because I don't. That's why we're doing this. This is all in good fun. Alright, let's get started. We begin with the summons. Summoning Zeus is not an easy task. Even the most skilled mages and sorcerers have difficulty reaching out across the heavens and pulling the supreme leader of Olympus down to earth. But there are ways. One could sacrifice an entire flock of sacred birds, perform rituals for years, even decades, or one could be chosen by Zeus himself. But the one thing you cannot do is threaten Zeus into coming. In contrast, summoning Cthulhu is child's play. All it takes is a great old one. Ark, a massive stone monument, and a really, really dark night. If you want to hear the cosmic horror, I'll put a link to one of my favorite videos ever made in the description below. So when Zeus arrived, he did so willingly. He was bored and looking for some entertainment, perhaps a little bit of target practice. He might have heard rumors of a great old one stirring in the depths of the ocean, and he may have wanted to check that out too. Point being, Zeus was expecting opposition. He expected to have to fight someone worthy of his power. What he didn't expect was to find a deep trench and a monolith covered in tentacles and eyes. Cthulhu has woken up, and Zeus is his first order of business. But this will take some time. You see, Summoning a great old one requires a great deal of preparation. It takes months, sometimes years. And during this time, cults work feverishly, performing horrible acts, making unimaginable sacrifices to ensure their ritual goes off without a hitch. During this time, Zeus would have been observing. He would have been watching as the cultists brought him offerings, attempting to bargain with him, to which Zeus would have laughed and taken those offerings for himself. Now normally, this would anger the cultists, but they were willing to sacrifice anything to get what they desired. So they kept bringing Zeus's gifts, and he kept taking them until finally they had appeased him enough that he allowed them to complete their ritual. And that's when Zeus struck. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Didn't Zeus imprison Cthulhu at the bottom of the ocean? Well, yes, he did. That wasn't exactly Zeus. Let me explain. You see, after the elder gods had driven Cthulhu into the ocean and sealed him beneath the waves, they left him there. They left him there because they were afraid to fight him. They knew that to kill Cthulhu would take all of their power combined, and so they sealed him there, hoping that eventually his power would fade and the world could go back to normal. But what if I told you that Zeus was one of those elder gods? Think about it. In the original myth, who imprisoned Cthulhu? We don't know. But in the poem, The Call of Cthulhu, written by H.P. Lovecraft, the only godlike beings who knew of Cthulhu's existence were the Elder Things. Those Elder Things worshipped a group of incredibly powerful beings, beings who became known as the Elder Gods. And guess who became known as the Elder Gods? The gods of Olympus, led by Zeus. I think you can see where I'm going with this. So when Zeus saw Cthulhu rising, he didn't wait. He didn't attempt to summon his godly siblings or rally the other Olympians. No, he attacked. Now I know what some of you are saying. How could Zeus have possibly defeated Cthulhu? But here's the thing. Zeus wouldn't defeat Cthulhu. He never intended to. His goal was always to hold Cthulhu back long enough that the world wouldn't end. So just before Cthulhu fully emerged from the water, Zeus unleashed his ultimate weapon, the lightning bolt. It cracked across the sky, striking Cthulhu directly. And then another, and another, and another, each one more powerful than the last. Zeus struck Cthulhu over and over again with his full power behind each strike, sending shockwaves of energy through the water, through the earth, through the very foundations of reality itself. And Cthulhu fought back. Tendrils lashed out, slamming into the god of the sky and earth, attempting to tear him limb from limb. But Zeus was ready for this. He was expecting Cthulhu to attack. And while he couldn't harm the great old one with his lightning, he could stun him long enough that the rest of the elder gods could arrive and bind him once more. So Zeus stood firm, unleashing bolt after bolt, holding Cthulhu off, keeping him from destroying the world. Now some of you might be wondering what happened to the cultists, and I'll tell you right now, none of them survived. As soon as Zeus revealed himself and began his assault on Cthulhu, he turned his attention to the cultists. With a wave of his hand, he obliterated them, leaving not a single survivor. He then turned back to Cthulhu and continued his assault, buying time for the other elder gods to arrive. You see, the elder gods knew of Zeus's power. They knew that he was strong enough to hold Cthulhu off, but they also knew that he couldn't defeat him. So they arrived just as Zeus had planned, and together they wrestled the great old one back into the sea and buried him beneath the waves once more. But that still leaves the question, who would win in a fight? Here's the thing. Neither of these beings could truly die. Zeus couldn't be killed. Cthulhu couldn't be destroyed. Sure, you could blast Cthulhu back into the ocean and seal him beneath the waves. Or you could trap his soul in a crystal and cast that crystal into the sun. But he would come back. You could destroy Zeus's mortal form and scatter his essence across the earth, but he would return. These beings are essentially immortal. So when we talk about who would win in a fight, we have to define what winning means. And when we do that, it's clear that Zeus wins. Don't get me wrong, Cthulhu would put up one hell of a fight. He would smash the Olympians and level the halls of Olympus. He would send the Titans back to their prisons and break the chains of the Cyclopes. He would destroy everything that Zeus holds dear, but he still wouldn't be able to kill the god. Zeus would survive, and in the end, he would come out on top. He would banish Cthulhu back to the void from which he came, trapping him there forever. He would seal away the great old one, ensuring that he would never again threaten the world. However, it's not all that clear that Cthulhu would actually go down that easily. Yeah, he'd be in trouble. There's no doubt about that. But remember, Cthulhu is beyond comprehension. Humans simply cannot understand the true nature of the great old ones. They can't comprehend it, otherwise they'd go insane. But Zeus is a god, and maybe he could do it. Maybe he could understand Cthulhu on some level and use that against him, but honestly, that's just speculation on my part. I think the best we can do is leave it up to you. Who do you think would win? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, I'll leave you with one final thought. Who do you think called Zeus to fight Cthulhu? Was it the cultists? Was it the elder gods? Or maybe it was someone else entirely. Someone who knew that the world would be in danger and knew that the only hope lay with the supreme leader of the Olympians, the Phantom Apprentice. Although the prequels are a bit of a mixed bag for Star Wars fans, they did give us some unforgettable images. One of them being the final confrontation between Obi-Wan Kenobi and his former apprentice, Anakin Skywalker, now fallen to the dark side and known as Darth Vader. The two dueled across an already destroyed and fiery Mustafa, with Obi-Wan ultimately winning the battle and leaving Anakin to be consumed by lava and presumed dead. This moment was important because it showed the strength of the dark side of the Force. If Anakin had not been brought down by Obi-Wan, he would have become the evil Lord Sidious's apprentice and taken on the name Darth. In addition, the duel itself was amazing to watch. The fight choreography was fantastic, and the way that the fight mirrored the one between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul on Naboo was also great. There's just something so satisfying about seeing Obi-Wan best another Sith Lord. Number 9. Jango Fett. Of all the bounty hunters that we've seen in the Star Wars universe, Jango Fett is certainly one of the most interesting. He was a Mandalorian who used his skills and expertise to become a mercenary for hire. Throughout the Clone Wars, we see various clone troopers attempt to hunt down and kill Jango, but it isn't until the second season that we finally get to meet him. He was a difficult opponent for even the Jedi, but it was actually a Jedi hunter, Asajj Ventress, who got the chance to face him first. Despite her being a formidable opponent, she is ultimately defeated by Jango. He is a very skilled swordsman and hand-to-hand combatant and could hold his own against some of the most powerful Jedi in the Order. Unfortunately, he wouldn't remain alive for long. After being tracked down and killed by Mace Windu, Jango's DNA was harvested to create the Grand Army of the Republic. Number 8. General Grievous. Another unforgettable bad guy from the prequel era is General Grievous. He was a Kaleesh cyborg, who originally led his people in a war against the insectoid race known as the Hook. When he was eventually captured by the Hook, he was reconstructed as a machine-like cyborg, losing his organic heart and lungs in the process. This didn't stop him from becoming a brilliant military commander, however. In fact, he became so feared by the Republic that it was believed he was responsible for the deaths of thousands of clones. Though he wasn't always the most competent strategist, Grievous was still a major thorn in the side of the Republic throughout the war. It was until the final days of the war that he was finally killed by Obi-Wan Kenobi on Utapau. Number 7. Asajj Ventress. Ventress is another character who hails from the prequel era. She was a Dathomirian Zabrak female who was originally trained as a Sith assassin by Count Dooku, however. When he felt that she was no longer useful to him, he betrayed her and threw her off of a balcony. This caused Ventress to leave the dark side for a time and become a bounty hunter instead. She would later come into conflict with fellow bounty hunter Cad Bane. After forming an alliance with him, they would end up helping each other out on various occasions. Eventually, however, she would return to the dark side and join forces with Mother Talzin, the leader of the Night Sisters. For a time, Ventress continued to serve the dark side until she was ultimately killed while attempting to assassinate Senator Bail Organa. Number 6. The Battle of Christoffel. The Battle of Christoffel is one of the most memorable battles from the show. It took place early in the first season and saw the Republic go head-to-head against the CIS in an attempt to control the planet Christoffel. What makes this battle so significant is that it showed just how much the clones and the CIS had improved as fighters. Although the Republic was victorious, it was a close call. We got some pretty epic moments, such as Captain Rex leading a squad of elite clone, commandos to take out a droid control ship, and the clones having to team up with local militia members in order to hold out against waves of droids. Some big-name characters also made their debut in this episode, including Jedi Master Even Pele and the cyborg Jedi Quinlan Vos. Number 5. Death Watch. During the third season of The Bad, we learned more about the Mandalorians and their culture. One group that we were introduced to was Death Watch, a Mandalorian splinter group who wanted to restore their people's warrior culture by starting a war with the Republic. They were led by the mysterious Pre Vizsla, who commanded a squadron of supercommandos called the Death Watch Commandos. This group proved to be dangerous opponents for the Republic, but they would eventually be defeated by the combined might of the Jedi and the regular Mandalorian forces. One of the most interesting aspects of Death Watch is that they were a group of Mandalorians who chose violence as a means to solve their problems rather than using diplomacy like the other clans. This made them a bit one-dimensional, but it was still cool to see them in action. Number 4. Cad Bane. Cad Bane is a character who needs no introduction. He's one of the most popular bounty hunters in Star Wars, thanks in part to his incredible skills as a fighter, gambler, marksman, and swordsman. In addition to this, he was also a brilliant strategist and tactician who was able to hold his own against some of the most powerful bounty hunters and Jedi in the galaxy. One of the most memorable things about Cad Bane is his distinctive appearance. He was a Duros, which is a relatively rare species in Star Wars. But what really set him apart was his unique headdress, which consisted of a pair of horns that were wrapped with netting. This, along with his sharp features and green skin, made him a very memorable character. Bane would continue to appear in various Star Wars media following the events of The Bad, including the animated series Rebels. Number 3. Maul. Maul is arguably one of the most iconic villains in Star Wars. He was a Zabrak male who was taken from his homeworld of Dathomir and trained in the ways of the dark side of the Force by Darth Sidious. Maul would eventually become a Sith Lord and take on the name Darth Maul. One of the most defining characteristics of Maul is his distinctive appearance. He was a tall, muscular humanoid with red, black, and white skin. His head was adorned with a pair of horns that were shaved down to nubs, and he had yellow eyes. Maul was also a master swordsman and could wield a lightsaber with incredible skill. He was so proficient with the weapon that he was able to defeat Qui-Gon Jinn in a battle on Naboo, despite the Jedi Master's superior experience. Although he would eventually die at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Maul would later be resurrected and go on to become one of the most powerful dark-side users in the galaxy. Count Dooku. Count Dooku was one of the most influential figures during the Clone Wars. He was a former Jedi who left the Order and turned to the dark side of the Force. Under the tutelage of Darth Sidious, he would eventually become a Sith Lord and take on the name Darth Tyrannus. Dooku was a brilliant swordsman and was able to hold his own against some of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy. He was also a master of manipulation and was able to persuade many alien species to join the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Although he would eventually be killed by Anakin Skywalker, Dooku's legacy would live on through his apprentice, Asajj Ventress, and coming in at no one, Darth Sidious. Darth Sidious is widely regarded as one of the most powerful Sith Lords in history. He was a master manipulator and was able to deceive the entire galaxy into believing that he was a peaceful senator, when in reality, he was the mastermind behind the Clone Wars. Sidious was also a brilliant swordsman and was able to defeat both Mace Windu and Yoda in one-on-one combat. Despite being a master of the dark side, Sidious would eventually be defeated and killed by his own apprentice, Darth Vader. Who do you think is the greatest villain in Star Wars? How the Muslims had been invited by the Jews to fight alongside them against the Meccans who were attacking them. And we also saw how the Muslims accepted this invitation, although they knew it was a very risky mission. They were heavily outnumbered. Their leader, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not a warrior, but a messenger. Most of his companions were not warriors either. They were merchants or traders, and they had no armor or even swords. Many of them had never fought in a battle before. But despite all these difficulties, they decided to help the Jews and to fight against the Meccans. So now that they are in battle, how did the battle unfold? What lessons can we learn from their courage and determination? What is the significance of this battle for the future of Islam? To answer these questions, we will discuss the following points. 1. The outcome of the Battle of Badr. 2. How the Muslims gained strength and confidence. 3. The impact of Islam in Medina. 4. The message of faith versus power. 5. Lessons for today's Ummah. Point no 1. The outcome of the Battle of Badr. The battle began with the Muslims taking their positions between the two flanks of the Jewish forces. When the Meccan army approached, they were shocked to see that the Muslims were so well organized and disciplined. Despite being outnumbered, the Muslims attacked first. They wanted to surprise the Meccans and break their ranks. This was a risky move, but it worked. The Muslims fought with great zeal and enthusiasm. They were eager to prove themselves and defend their faith. On the other hand, the Meccans were confused and hesitant. They couldn't believe that the weak Muslims could challenge them. They thought they would easily win the battle and plunder the caravan, but they underestimated the Muslims. The Muslims fought with a strong will and determination. They didn't care about their own safety or their material losses. They only focused on defending their religion and their honor. The Meccans panicked and started to run away. Some of them fell into a nearby river and drowned. Others were killed by the Muslim archers. Muslims pursued them and inflicted heavy casualties on them. The battle lasted only half an hour. It was one of the shortest but most decisive battles in history. The Muslims won a great victory against the Meccans. They lost only 19 men while they killed or wounded more than 70 Meccans. This was a miracle sent by Allah to show His power and support for His messenger and His new religion. Now we come to point number 2, how the Muslims gained strength and confidence. After the battle, the Muslims returned to Medina feeling very proud and happy. They had proved themselves to be strong and courageous. They had defended their faith and their honor against the mighty Meccans. They had shown that they were not afraid of death, and that they were willing to sacrifice everything for their religion. But they also felt very tired and exhausted. They had fought a hard and dangerous battle, had bled and suffered injuries. They needed to rest and recover, yet they couldn't do that because they had to bury the dead and take care of the wounded. They had to clean the battlefield and collect the spoils. They had to prepare for the next battle, because the Meccans would surely come back stronger and smarter. So the Muslims worked hard and diligently. They didn't waste any time or energy. They knew that they had a lot to do and not much time to do it. They helped each other and encouraged each other. They shared their food and water. They prayed together and thanked Allah for their victory. They learned valuable lessons from their experience. They realized that they needed more weapons and armor. They needed more training and discipline. They needed more unity and cooperation. They needed more faith and trust in Allah. So the Muslims went back to work, study, trade, and family life. But now they were different. They were stronger and more confident. They were more determined and more hopeful. They were more connected to Allah and to each other. They were more aware of their mission and their purpose. We come now to point number 3, the impact of Islam in Medina. The Battle of Badr was a turning point in the history of Islam. It was the first major victory of the Muslim community. It was the first time they showed the strength and power of Islam. It was the first time they established their identity and independence. Before Badr, the Muslims were scattered and weak. They were persecuted and threatened. They were isolated and dependent. They needed allies and protection. But after Badr, the Muslims were united and powerful. They were respected and feared. They were self-sufficient and free. They had their own state and society. They had their own laws and culture. They had their own army and economy. They had their own message and mission. The Battle of Badr was a revelation for Medina. It was the moment when Medina became Muslim. Before Badr, Medina was a city of tribes and conflicts. It was a city of Jews, Christians, polytheists, and pagans. It was a city of disputes and disorder. It was a city that needed guidance and justice. But after Medina was a city of Islam. It was a city of peace and unity. It was a city of believers and followers of one God. It was a city that followed the Quran and the Sunnah. It was a city that built a model of tolerance and coexistence. The Battle of Badr was a blessing for Medina. It was the moment when Medina found its destiny. It was the moment when Medina became the capital of Islam. Moving on to point number 4, the message of faith versus power. The Battle of Badr was not only a military victory, but also a spiritual and moral victory. It was a victory of faith over disbelief, of truth over falsehood, of good over evil. It was a victory of the weak over the strong, of the few over the many, of the oppressed over the oppressor. It was a victory of justice over tyranny, of freedom over slavery, of hope over despair. It was a victory that inspired many and warned many. It inspired the Muslims to be brave and steadfast. It inspired the non-Muslims to reflect and choose. It warned the disbelievers of Mecca to repent and submit. It warned the hypocrites and the traitors to stay away. It warned the enemies of Islam to beware and give peace a chance. The message of Badr was clear and loud. It was a message that shook the world and changed its course. It was a message that proclaimed the arrival of a new era, the era of Islam. Finally, we come to the last point, which is point no. 5 lessons for today's MY. The Battle of Badr has many lessons for us today. It teaches us about the nature of jihad. Jihad is not only fighting in wars and battles. Jihad is struggling in all aspects of life. Jihad is striving for excellence, truth, justice, peace, and freedom. Jihad is resisting oppression, injustice, ignorance, sin, and evil. Jihad is sacrificing for a cause, even if it means giving up one's life. It teaches us about the importance of Iman. Iman is not just believing in one's mind. Iman is living by one's faith. Iman is acting on one's convictions. Iman is obeying Allah and His Messenger. Iman is fearing Allah and the hereafter. It teaches us about the power of dua. Dua is not just asking for help. Dua is communicating with Allah. Dua is seeking forgiveness, guidance, strength, victory, and mercy. Dua is pleading for oneself and others. Dua is expecting and hoping for the best. It teaches us about the value of sacrifice. Sacrifice is not just giving up something material. Sacrifice is giving up something dear to one's heart. Sacrifice is giving up something that one enjoys or profits from. Sacrifice is giving up something that one loves or likes. Sacrifice is giving up something for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. So my brothers and sisters, the Battle of Badr was a great event in Islamic history. It was a battle that changed the course of not only Medina, but the entire world. It was a battle that showed the strength and power of Islam. It was a battle that revealed the bravery and determination of the early Muslims. It was a battle that left us with valuable lessons and teachings. May Allah Almighty grant us the Iman, the courage and the sacrifice of those early Muslims. May Allah Almighty make us from those who won the Battle of Badr and the battles of other prophets. And may Allah Almighty bless us with the peace and the victory of Badr and every day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.